Alright, everybody, it is now Sunday morning, and we are coming in here to get the fish tanks turned on. And I'm going to start once again with my native tank over here. We're going to go straight to it and have a look, find out what kind of disaster we're looking at this morning. So, alright, looks like pretty good sized disaster. That is the remains of my Eastern Stoneroller. I was fully expecting to find him dead this morning. It was swimming around pretty rough last night, kind of on its side, darting and dashing, doing those little fits and starts. Never a good sign. Let's see, there's the smallmouth in the back. He's still alive. I've got a couple of minnows left in here. This minnow in particular, if you look at its tail is really almost like to the point where it seems like it's going to rot and just fall off. Interesting growth on the front glass here. I've never noticed this before. I get algae growing on the front glass, but if you see all these little white specks, here's a bunch of them. Don't know what that is. Those are like little fuzzy white things. Could it be some of that bacteria actually growing on the glass? I think what I brought into this tank was a bacteria called Columnaris. One of my viewers sent me a very good article this morning where I was reading more about its pathology and symptoms and effect on the fish and so on and so forth, and I'm convinced it's the Columnaris that I've got in the tank and not some other sort of fungus or infection or something like that. So if it is the Columnaris, then that's really going to change the dynamics within this tank, and I've got to do some thinking about it before we go any further in this tank. At this point, I'm honestly not even sure if I'm going to continue treating the tank, but we'll see. I don't know. I'm also starting to get some weird the way the algae and stuff on this glass is starting to break down and come off. I'm wondering if it's not cyanobacteria in the tank that is starting to die and break up, because I did put my initial dose of antibiotics in the tank yesterday, and I put a really heavy dose, almost a double dose of antibiotics in the tank, and I think that could be what's causing some of this weird look in there. Another thing I'm going to have to do is start checking my nitrogen cycle very carefully, because I have a feeling we're going to get some damage done to the nitrogen cycle, and it's going to be because of this medication I'm putting in there. So again, I want to finish reading that article. It was very lengthy. I did read quite a bit of it this morning, but I don't think it's the kind of article that I'm going to be able to digest all of that in one, glancing read this morning. So we're going to look more at that, and then we're going to decide where to go from there. But any way you slice it, this is not good news for this tank, obviously, and it can potentially be some pretty bad news for my fish room in general if I'm not really careful from here on out, and I wind up transferring this bacteria, which you've already seen can be very deadly very quickly when turned loose in your aquarium. So the rest of my medication will be showing up today. I had some here already yesterday. It was almost as much as I wanted. And I'll clarify that real quick. I did have somebody comment about underdosing with antibiotics, and they're very right. You should not underdose with antibiotics. What I did was not really underdosing. The full dose would have been 12 packages dissolved in water and then put into this 125-gallon tank. A lot of times when you start taking antibiotics, I know when I do personally, if I've got some sort of infection, my initial dose I always make really strong. I'll double the initial dose just to sort of wham the infection with a huge dose of antibiotics. And then on day 2, I back off to doing a standard dose, a single daily dose. And the recommendations for this tank was the same thing. On day 1, you were supposed to do a double dose, and then from there on, you did a single dose. So technically, on day 1, anything above a single dose is still going to be effective. I'm still putting the effective dosage in the tank. The additional dosaging is simply for that whammy doodle, you know, that huge impact that you're going to try just to knock that stuff down on the first day. So I had almost enough for a full double dose. I only had 20 packages when I should have had, I'm sorry, I had 22 packages when I should have had 25. So that to me is close enough. It's not as though I underdosed this tank. It's just that instead of giving it a full double dose, I gave it a slightly less than double dose on its first day. And then from here on out, I'm supposed to put 12 packages a day in for the next 5 days. So I probably will continue treating it. I almost wish I hadn't started the treatment, because now that I have, I kind of have to finish it. I'm more at risk of setting up a super strain of the bacteria by basically exposing it to antibiotics and then not killing it off entirely. It develops a resistance to the antibiotics, and you can develop a super strain of bacteria that can now no longer be killed by normal antibiotic methods. So I don't want to wind up developing that, because if I develop it in this tank as the incubator of a super strain, that could be really, really, really bad news for the rest of my fish room. So I think now that I've kind of gotten started dosing this, whether I like it or not, I'm just going to be forced to spend the money. And this is going to cost me about $60 to wind up treating this tank in its entirety through the full 5 or 6 day process, however long it takes. This medication is not inexpensive, and I don't think people really were ever expecting to be dosing 125-gallon tanks. This is probably more designed around the idea of dosing a 10 or a 20-gallon quarantine tank rather than the full tank like this. But unfortunately, this is the tank I got the infection in, so this is the tank we're going to have to treat. I also plan on doing some video discussing quarantine methods, why I don't quarantine in this tank, the potential risks of not quarantining, and the hassles of quarantining, etc., etc. So we're going to do a lot of talking about this tank over the next few days, so get ready for that. Make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss any of the videos I've got coming up on this or any other tanks. And don't forget, of course, this is my native tank. So thanks again for watching this update, and I will see you real soon in the next one.